Hello students, welcome to week 3 for Journal 150, Media and Society. This week we'll be looking at some ideas related to the media being the message within media technologies and communication technologies within its influence on society. You'll see in the week 3 agenda, we're reading chapter 9 on media technology. We're also watching a series of videos. One of them is a frontline video on revolution, a digital revolution in Cario and how it related to social media usage and overthrowing the government. And then the other ones are all centered around Marshall McLuhan, and that relates directly to one of your assignments. So do keep that in mind. It's really important that you watch all of them. They all the videos pertain to both assignments you have this week, and it'd be very helpful for you to get started on that early. I'll also talk about Marshall McLuhan this week in our lecture. It's a very pivotal and important role in the content of the course and where we're going forward with looking at media influence within society. Once you watch those videos, you'll then be required to complete media and culture activity number 2 as well as reflection number 3. And do not forget, as stated in the syllabus, all discussion board assignments have 2 deadlines. Your original responses are due on Friday, so your actual answer to the reflection post, and then all of your replies are due by Sunday. You are required to reply to at least 2 students. That's the minimum requirement. However, it's strongly encouraged that you reply to more than 2 students. Media and culture activity number 2 requires you to watch the Frontline Revolution Cario documentary that's listed in Blackboard. It's hyperlinked within the assignment as well as provided as a standalone video to watch. After you watch the documentary, you're going to answer 3 questions in APA format, and the entire assignment should be 500 words. So after answering all 3 questions, that you should have 500 words worth of content related to describing the situation in Cario, as well as potential influence through media. What significance did media technologies play in this situation, and what can we learn from the significance of media influence through media technology within this situation? You'll get a lot of good information out of this. This video provides you, and this documentary provides you with a direct correlation into how media technologies influence society in very pivotal moments and within the history of a particular city and country. So it's very important that you keep that in mind. Additionally, we have reflection number 3 due as well. So after you watch all of the 4 videos within our learning module this week, it's important that you spend some time reflecting on Marshall McLuhan. So once you review all the documentaries and have some good understanding of the significance of this theorist and pivotal person within media technology, you'll answer the 4 questions related to McLuhan. You'll talk about the significance of him as a media effects scholar. You'll also describe what his term was of the global village, his theory of that and why it was significant, as well as the term the media is the message. After that, you'll provide a reflection on 2 things that you really learned from him and how he relates to the course content. Remember, your original post is due no later than Friday, as well as your replies are due no later than Sunday. When we look at media technologies, it's important to spend some time reflecting on how media technology matters. And particularly what we're referring to here is communicative technologies or communication technologies. So a lot of our devices today provide us with information that relate to how how we communicate utilizing technology. Our smartphones provide us with a communication technology platform and things of that nature. It's important to know that media has shifted significantly with the advent of these technologies to now have a never-ending news cycle. The ability to time shift in terms of binge watching and consuming media is no longer bound by time. 40, 50 years ago, we would all gather around the television to watch one TV show that only aired at that one time per week. Now we're not bound by that. It also allows us to cross social boundaries and a changing sense of community, but it creates a networked society. So keep some of these things in mind as we move through the course content. As we look at the influence of media technologies and why they matter within society, we need to look at digitization as well as the internet and mobile devices. These things here have really provided a new media landscape. And what we found is that new media is changing the way we consume mass media. There is a blurred line of distinction between the individual and the mass audience. In a sense, we used to know that television, radio, printed media like newspapers, magazines, and books were contained and delivered for mass audiences, and then we would significantly alter how we would communicate to individual audiences using more interpersonal theories and such. What we have found now is there's a blurred distinction between the individual and the mass audience, and that we're really speaking to them both in all situations. There's also a blurred distinction between producers and receivers. Anyone can produce content and anyone can receive content now. There used to be a firm line between you either were a content producer and that content was produced and delivered from one specific organization to consumers or receivers. Now we all can become media producers with recording something on our phone, putting information out there on some social media account, a blog, a website, whatever it may be. So there's been this real interactive push towards communication and with the advent of media technologies. Additionally, it's important to see that we look at how social constructionism has really played a role in the construction of communication technologies. So essentially, if we look at social constructionism, we can see here that we've addressed this question of what people do with technologies, and that we understand that these communication technologies are embedded in an ongoing social process that affect the evolution of the technology itself. So human agency tends to take the center stage in the use and the consumption of communication technologies. For example, if we look at radio, the use of radio was shaped by different social forces. Government, corporate interest, and amateur operators developed radio in order to disseminate information on a mass market to consumers. The television adapted to the consumer market to rise and provide them with content that was useful for them. We've found that the internet resulted in complex social processes that really influenced how society consumed it. Same thing with Web 2.0, all those social media and user-based apps and things like that are on our smartphones. So as we think about that, we need to move into this idea of understanding really where some of this originated. And this is where Marshall McLuhan comes into play. He was very pivotal in really shaping and theorizing, not only that, but predicting and using foreshadow to think about how media technologies would influence society at a later point. Now, it's important to know that by trade, in his academic career, McLuhan was a literary scholar. He was an English professor. However, today he's now known as one of the greatest mass communication theorists due to some of the media effects theories that he coined and phrases he would write about and discuss in his time while he was still alive. So he is noted as one of the first noteworthy scholars of media analysis. It's very, very, when it comes to media ecology, he is the guy to go to. And when we look at it, he really coined the phrase, the global village, and the medium is the message. Now, it's important that as we get into these ideas, that we understand that McLuhan came up with these ideas and this idea of technological determinism that we're going to get into in a second in the 60s, when the primary form of communication technologies that were used on a mass scale was the radio, the telephone, and the television. So when we look at that, McLuhan told us that when we need to look at what technologies do to the people, he found that technological determinism provided an overwhelming and inevitable effect of technologies on the users. Really, what he's known for really kind of getting into is saying that technology cannot determine culture or social outcomes, as technology is merely the extension of human capacity. So society will evolve and move to whatever the latest technology is being introduced to us. So if we look at smartphones and things like that, we can see that we used to live in a world where we were not holding many computers in our pocket. We had cell phones, if that, and we communicated on the internet on a desktop computer. However, the smartphone came out and society caught up to what the smartphone was able to do, and now we have a society reliant on that type of mobile or media technology. So technological determinism tells us that. And it's really pivotal that he came up with this in terms of television and radio at the time when he thought of it. He felt that radio and television, that society would determine, that technology would determine the role and the influence that device had in society. So when we look at it, he told us that we need to consider it's not really what we use to communicate. It's not really what we communicate, it's what we use to communicate that speaks more to what it is. And so he had this phrase, and this is a really simple way of thinking about how media influences society, by thinking that the medium is the message, and it's not really what we're saying that really matters. And that's really, really profound if you think about it. McLuhan was saying to us that we need to consider what communication mediums, what media technologies we are using to communicate rather than what we are saying. It necessarily does not matter what you say, but what you're using to say that information that speaks to the technological deterministic view of a society. So we are bound to what we use in communication technologies to influence and shape how society functions. Let's take that back a little further. So if we look at that more simply said, professors and students have had interaction no matter what throughout society. There's always, since the advent of higher education, there's always been a professorial and a student relationship with a dichotomy where the student has a need, or the professor has to serve the student, and the student may have a need from the professor. Students have been asking professors questions on assignments since the advent of higher education. That's easy to say, right? Well, it's not the medium in which we use to communicate that. That communication will always be there. It's looking at how that medium influences society. So today I receive emails from students. 40, 50 years ago, you would have to stand outside my office or call me on the phone and set an appointment to ask me a question. So we can look at how technology has evolved to determine its influence in society based on the way we communicate with people today. Think about how this has impacted the customer service industry. A lot of people are more prone to go on Twitter and start to rant about the company when they're having a poor customer service exchange rather than speaking to the manager in a face-to-face setting. Technology and media technology specifically have influenced and determined how they will be used in impacting society. That gets into the idea of the medium as the message. When we look at the global village, this phrase was coined in 1962, where he theorized that in the new age of electronic communication, meaning television, radio, and phone, had shrunk the world down to the size of a village. A small village would allow for instant communication, as where global communication would not. So he was saying that our society, our world, will become a global village with the advent of more communication technologies, meaning the smartphone allows us to communicate with people all over the world near instantly, regardless of space and time, whereas 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, this was not possible. We were able to, at the time, maybe use phone or send something in the mail or something of that nature that really influenced and impacted how we communicated with them. But at that point, he really showed us that, look, society is going to, instead of growing further apart, become closer together in this idea of a global village. So it's really important to take some of those things that he says to heart and kind of really internalize them and look at how they influence us within our coursework and how we're looking at how media influences society, especially with the assignments this week. So do keep in mind you're reading Chapter 9. You have 4 or 5 videos to watch on McLuhan and the Cario Revolution, the Frontline documentary. You're completing Media and Culture Activity number 2, as well as Reflection number 3. If you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to interacting with you this week, and I pray you all have a blessed week. God bless.